From Lisbon, this is Frontlines and Backrooms Brief, the key stories shaping our world this week and the commentary that makes sense of them.
Welcome to Frontlines and Backrooms Brief. While the United States is gearing up for an attack on Iran, the European Union struck a trade deal with India. European officials called it the mother of all deals. Canada made a strategic partnership with China, with Canadians hoping that they will be able to diversify trade partnership and catalyze massive new levels of investments, as it was quoted in the official communiqué of the Canadian government. We are just in January of 2026 and it is already obvious that the world is in a phase of significant reconfiguration. Despite the speed of events, the whole process will not end soon. But by the end of this year, we will certainly have an outline of what the world will look like at the end of this process. While this new world is being built in boardrooms from Delhi to Beijing, the old world may be facing its most explosive test yet in Persian Gulf. And let's start with Iran. On January 26, the U.S. Navy's USS Abraham Lincoln carrier strike group entered the Middle East. The group went silent by vanishing from public tracking and turning off its transponders while closing to Iran. This is perhaps the strongest signal yet that an attack on Iran is imminent. Except some diplomatic miracle happens. But who believes in miracles, and especially in diplomacy lately? President Trump stays unwavering in demands and threats, but still juggling between full-blown threats and hope that the U.S. Armada will finish deterrence without using force.
We have a lot of very big, very powerful ships sailing to Iran right now, and it would be great if we didn't have to use them. Okay? I told him two things. Number one, no nuclear, and number two, stop killing protesters.
U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said that the U.S. military will be prepared to carry out whatever President Trump's decision on Iran.
Rebuild the perception of America, and at the Department of War that meant reestablishing deterrence. What happened in Afghanistan, what happened in Ukraine, a war that never would have occurred, what happened on October 7th in Israel, never would have happened under President Trump. So as a result, we're having to rebuild how our enemies perceive us. And when President Trump said we're not getting a nuclear Iran, you won't have a nuclear bomb, he meant it. And we sent those B-2s halfway around the world, and they never noticed. Same thing with Iran right now, ensuring that they have all the options to make a deal. They should not pursue nuclear capabilities. We will be prepared to deliver whatever this president expects of the War Department.
Pressure comes from the European Union as well. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard is now designated as a terrorist organization. High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Kaja Kallas.
In Iran, horrific crackdown on protesters has come at a heavy human cost. The EU already has sweeping sanctions in place, and today ministers agreed to designate Iran Revolutionary Guard as a terrorist organization.
So, what would this war actually be about? Human rights abuses and the high number of victims during Iran's recent unrest are often cited, but they are not the core issue. The demands placed before Iran go far beyond that, and taken together amount to a demand for full strategic capitulation. At the center is the insistence that Iran abandon not only any pursuit of nuclear weapons, but its civilian nuclear program altogether, including a complete halt to uranium enrichment and the surrender of existing stockpiles. Added to this are demands to drastically reduce Iran's ballistic missile capabilities and to end all support for allied militant groups across the region. In effect, Iran is being asked to cross every major red line at once, without guarantees and without leverage. This is not a negotiation. It is a demand for surrender. Without war if possible, with war if necessary. Let's start with uranium, because this is where the crisis actually begins. Last year, the International Atomic Energy Agency warned that Iran had stockpiled more than 400 kilograms of uranium enriched up to 60%. To understand why this matters, some context is needed. Under the 2015 nuclear agreement, Iran was allowed to process no more than 300 kilograms of uranium enriched to 3.67%, a level suitable for civilian nuclear energy. Uranium enriched to 60% is far beyond civilian use and sits just below weapons grade. At 90%, uranium is considered fully usable for nuclear weapons. The International Atomic Energy Agency was later cited by the United States and Israel as justification for military action. Iran, however, argues it no longer considers the agreement binding after the US withdrew from it during President Trump's first term. Regarding the ballistic missiles, 5 types of those have ranges between 1,700 and 2,500 kilometers, which puts Israel and all US military bases in the region within range.
The baseline is this. We have 30 to 40,000 American troops stationed across 8 or 9 facilities in that region. All are within the reach, theoretically, not theoretically, in reality, all are within the reach of an array of thousands of Iranian one-way UAVs and Iranian short-term ballistic missiles, short-range ballistic missiles that threaten our troop presence. We have to have enough force and power in the region, just on a baseline, to defend against that possibility. That at some point, as a result of something, the Iranian regime decides to strike at our troop presence in the region. The president always reserves the preemptive defensive option. In essence, if we have indications that in fact they're going to attack our troops in the region, to defend our personnel in the region. We also have security agreements, the Defense of Israel Plan and others, that require us to have a force posture in the region to defend against that. And so I think it's wise and prudent to have a force posture within the region that could respond and potentially, not necessarily what's going to happen, but if necessary, preemptively prevent the attack against thousands of American servicemen and other facilities in the region and our allies.
Lastly, US demands that Iran stop supporting and financing militant groups around the region. But the key question is what is left from those groups after Israel's last year's bombing spree around the region. This will not be the first and for sure not the last time that the region is a nail-biting position, that worried about possible spillover. The US obviously have a plan for what to hit. We can be almost certain targets would include nuclear and missile infrastructure. No doubt that targets would be military and security powers like the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. But it should not come as a surprise if Washington were to consider a surgical strike targeting Iran's top leadership, including Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. With the missiles that I already mentioned and a warning from Iran that the finger is already on their trigger, we can all count on Iran's immediate retaliation that would include not only US bases in the Gulf countries, but targets in Israel and Gulf oil infrastructure. That would bring regional escalation with Israel joining the fight. And without a single doubt, Israel is the biggest supporter of this possible war with Iran. With other Arab countries, especially Gulf countries, binded by Abraham Accords and Egypt in the US pocket, Iran is the last real threat to Israel's survival. Bearing in mind that 22% of global oil and LNG goes through Strait of Hormuz, even a short and limited disruption would spike oil prices and freight rates, just to mention two. Lastly, no one can rule out uncontrolled escalation. In the long run, a limited strike is unlikely to stay limited. No doubt that airstrikes would achieve some goals. But Iran is not any country. It is not a country where regime change can be achieved with pinprick operation. This is a hardened state with a powerful will to survive. Undermining that will to fight, regime will to survive, and their capabilities to hurt the United States, where it hurts the most, the US military in the region, the war could be prolonged. Something that President Trump can't afford without losing Congress in the upcoming midterm elections, risking impeachment proceedings in which Democrats would very much enjoy. Lastly, is it worth it to start this war after all? No, this war could only bring more problems to the world, which is in shambles already. Regime change is unlikely outcome. Only transition that could happen is from cleric and civilian to military ruling of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. So this war wouldn't be a final punch to the regime change. Reza Pahlavi will need to wait, and the United States could engage with more diplomacy, swapping places between Pete Hegseth and Marco Rubio. Because regime change is a long-term, not short-term gain, and it depends on internal dynamics above all. Yes, Iran's crisis is structural, with sustained cross-class protest eroding the regime legitimacy. However, a bottom-up overthrow remains unlikely in the short term. So, if the President Trump wants to avoid an even more oppressive military regime in Tehran, the best way is a diplomatic one. This possible catastrophe is still in the making and avoidable. In the shadow of possible war in the Persian Gulf, another world is being built, not with missiles but with trade deals. On January 27, 2026, after almost 20 years of failed talks, the European Union and India signed a free trade agreement. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen called it the mother of all deals.
Prime Minister, distinguished friend, we did it. We delivered the mother of all deals. We are creating a market of 2 billion people. And this is the tale of two giants, the world's second and fourth largest economies.
The agreement creates a free trade zone for nearly 2 billion people and covers around a quarter of global economy. The EU hopes it will double exports to India by 2032. But this deal is not only about trade, it is about power. India is opening parts of its market it protected for decades. Tariffs on European cars, once over 100%, will drop sharply under yearly quota. Duties on machinery, chemicals and medicines will be removed. European wine will also become cheaper for Indian consumers. In return, the EU gives duty-free access to most Indian goods. This is a major boost for Indian industries like textiles, leather, jewels and seafood, sectors that recently lost trade privileges in Europe. Why now, after 20 years of deadlock? The answer is simple: the United States and China. Both Europe and India are reacting to a world where US trade policy has become unpredictable and aggressive. The EU faces tariff threats from Washington. India is already under heavy US tariffs despite previous political goodwill. At the same time, both are trying to reduce dependence on China. This is not coincidence, it is adjustment. The deal was signed together with a new security partnership covering maritime security, cyber threats and defense cooperation. For India, it means less reliance on Russian weapons. For Europe, it strengthens its Indo-Pacific strategy. The message is clear. The middle powers are no longer waiting for guarantees from Washington. They are building alternatives. The same logic explains Canada's new strategic partnership with China. At Davos, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney put it bluntly: the US-led rule-based international order has been ruptured.
Argue the middle powers must act together because if we're not at the table, we're on the menu.
Ottawa wants to reduce dependence on the US market. China agreed to lower tariffs on Canadian canola. Canada opened limited access for Chinese electric vehicles. President Trump is furious and responded with threats of 100% tariffs of Canadian goods.
Canada is not doing well. They're doing very poorly. And you can't look at China as the answer. I know China very well. I know President Xi's a friend of mine. I know him very well. But that's a big hurdle to go over when you get Canada. The first thing they're going to do is say you're not allowed to play ice hockey anymore. That's not good. Canada's not going to like that.
The world is not changing. It is reorganizing in response to Washington's posture. The old center of gravity is weakening. New poles are forming between Europe and India, between Canada and China. And this, not just war or diplomacy, may be the defining geopolitical story of our moment. And at the end of this week's Frontlines and Backrooms Brief, remembrance. She was 5 years old. Had she been born anywhere else on Earth, she would be alive today. On January 29th, 2 years ago, Hind Rajab was killed in Gaza alongside her uncle, aunt, and 3 cousins. They were not killed by an airstrike. They were intentionally shot by the Israeli army. By chance, Hind survived the initial attack. Trapped inside a car, surrounded by the bodies of her family, and with an Israeli tank approaching, she managed to call emergency services. For the next 4 hours, she stayed on the line. According to the Hind Rajab Foundation, the commander of the Israeli army's 401st Brigade, Beni Aharon, gave the order. Hind was killed, executed, with more than 300 rounds of ammunition fired from a distance of between 12 and 23 meters, according to investigation by forensic architecture. After sunset, around 6 p.m. local time, a Palestinian Red Crescent ambulance was dispatched. 2 paramedics, Yusuf Al-Zaino and Ahmed Al-Modoun, reached the scene. They were heroes. They knowingly drove toward a military position to try to save a 5-year-old child, with near certainty that they will be killed. They were killed as well. Further analysis by forensic architecture and earshot indicates that the car carrying Hind and her family was later crashed by military vehicle, most likely a bulldozer. It took 12 days before Palestinian paramedics and Hind Rajab's family were able to reach the site of the attack in Gaza City. 12 days. Israel's response followed a familiar pattern: deny, deflect, deceive, and wait for attention to move elsewhere. The Hind Rajab Foundation has since filed a war crimes complaint against Beni Aharon with the International Criminal Court. As of September 2025, he serves as a commander of the Israeli Army's 146th Division. This tragedy is immense, but it is not unique. One life among many. A footnote in time, but one that will not be forgotten. And that's the world this week. From the Frontlines and Backrooms, I'm Vladimir Bobetic. And until next time, keep looking beyond the noise.